Well, happy Wednesday of Holy Week. I pray that God has been using this time as we walk with Jesus to the cross. It's happening on Friday as a time really for you to find new and exciting things, to rekindle your passion for who Jesus is and your love of Him as you see the things that He's gone through. Over these past few days, we've seen Jesus come in triumphantly into Jerusalem. On Monday, cleanse the temple. Yesterday, on Tuesday, being tested by the religious leaders and teaching. But today, it seems like silence. It seems like not much goes on. And in the Gospel of Mark, in just a few verses 3 to 11, we see all of what happens on this day. While this day may seem like one of the least of the days, it's actually the day where it all comes together for things to go into motion, for Jesus to be betrayed by Judas. I'm going to read you those verses that are in Mark 14, and I want to just point out a few things here as we continue to walk with Jesus towards the cross. And so we see in the verse part of chapter 14, the people, the chief priests, the scribes, they're trying to figure out how they could silently make a plot to kill Jesus. And then we have a scene change to the house that Jesus was staying at in Bethany. It says in verse 3, "And while he was at Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, and as he was reclining at table, a woman came with an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard, very costly. And she broke the flask and poured it over his head. And there were some who said to themselves indignantly, 'Why was the ointment wasted like that? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor.' And they scolded her." Now, we see through these first few verses, this woman that comes in, anointing the feet of Jesus. Other gospel, Matthew and Luke, tell us that this was actually Mary who came in. Mary, the sister of Lazarus and Martha. And also, we see those who were indignant against her. And the other Gospels actually give us some insight into this by showing us that it was Judas who was the one Judas Iscariot, who actually said these things, who was indignant and scolded Mary here. But the point is not the people here. The point is the value of Jesus. Look at how he responds in verse 6. It says, "But Jesus said, 'Leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you could do good for them, but you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for burial. And truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her.'" This woman saw the value of Jesus, saw and had true faith in who Jesus was. And so we see her putting a value on him, on the Son of God. 300 denarii is actually about a year's wage. So we're talking about a significant amount of money that she spent or she used in properly honoring Jesus. You see, she saw Jesus for who he truly was. But we see the disciples here who were rebuking her, they didn't really see him for who he truly was. They didn't value Jesus the way that this woman did, in sacrificing this big amount of money to properly honor Jesus. In fact, we see Judas in the very next verse. He was most likely the one that spoke out against this act. We see how much he valued, I guess, or how little he valued his Messiah or his teacher, his rabbi, when he goes to the chief priests in order to betray him. And when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money. And in other Gospels, we see that this was a mere 30 pieces of silver. Almost nothing compared to what this woman was giving just to honor Jesus. So our question for today is, do we value Jesus Do we see him for who he really is? Someone who is worth all of our time, all of our energy, all of our efforts because of who he is? Or are we like Judas, who undervalue Jesus so much and use Jesus? In this case, Judas was the keeper of the money bags, and many times he had his hand in there and was stealing money from the ministry of Jesus. Do we just look at Jesus as someone who can benefit us, and that we just look for the value around Jesus, using Jesus? Or do we see Jesus for who he really is? Do we value more the ointment that this woman was putting on him? Or do we value him for who he is? We need to get our priorities in line and see what we truly value, what we truly care about. So even as we walk with Jesus, we must see him for who he is.